Welcome to NY Seed Round, one-on-one conversations with the founders, investors, and operators, proving NYC is the best place to build a business. Hey, I'm Justin Walls. I have here with me today the co-founder and CTO of Plannery, Andrew First. Andrew, thanks for joining me today. You have a really impressive background that we'll get into, but first, what is Plannery for folks that haven't heard about it yet?
Well, thank you, and great to be on the show. Plannery is a financial wellness platform specifically built for healthcare professionals. And so what that means is we're helping healthcare workers go from mass amounts of debt that they start their careers with all the way to building wealth. And we work with hospitals to help them tackle clinical burnout, which leads to attrition, and it leads to them losing money in the bottom line. Really, the way we do it is through this employee benefit that they give to their employees, and it essentially takes care of them financially.
Got it. That makes sense. So walk me through, there's a medical professional who is perhaps pursuing anesthesiology, and maybe they're in their first year. And, that's a pretty lucrative career, depending on where you go, but you've probably racked up quite a bit of debt. Walk me through the experience of somebody in that situation before potentially considering a Plannery-like solution.
The average physician actually graduates with $250,000 of student loan.
Really?
It's insane. And the monthly payment that they would be making on this is over $2,000 on average. And then on top of that, you've got personal expenses, during all your years in medical school, residency, fellowship, where you're being underpaid. And a lot of these people also take out personal loans and they get into credit card debt. And that's also something that doesn't get talked about much because credit card debt definitely has a stigma around it.
Yeah.
But when you're in credit card debt, you're paying interest rates above 30%. Your credit scores are going to be, very low, probably below 650, and you're really shut out of the financial system. It might even be hard to sign a lease for an apartment when your credit score is that low. So life is just really stressful.
Yeah, and I assume that could potentially impact things as you're trying to be a practitioner, like anybody's day to day. When you have those stresses, it's a lot, but especially in healthcare setting, that can be potentially dangerous too, right?
Oh yeah. So that stress, unfortunately, people take it to work. And when you have this repeated stress over and over, there's a term called clinical burnout, which is, it's burnout that happens in a clinical setting with these physicians or nurses, anyone in healthcare. And unfortunately, that leads to medical errors, poor patient outcomes, kind of a contagious, lower morale in the workplace.
Yeah, that makes sense. And probably a lot of healthcare professionals quitting the industry ultimately, right?
Or they'll just be moving around from job to job, looking for something better for a while. And that also leads to a lot of costs by employers where they have to continue to train new employees. So for example, nurses, a new nurse, it takes about $30,000 to recruit a nurse. And then for someone out of college, an employer will spend $75,000 training that person over 6 months to be able to actually see patients. And then before a year is up, 34% of nurses will leave. And generally, it's their first year of their career. They're not going to be quitting nursing right off the bat.
Right.
They'll be going somewhere else that might be offering $1 or $2 an hour more.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a sign of, they're susceptible because of their financial stress and, making ends meet.
Got it. That makes sense. So walk me through the experience. You work directly with healthcare organizations to sort of offer Plannery as a benefit, right?
Yeah.
So what are the type of products or the things that you offer to the healthcare professionals themselves?
Yeah. So our long-term vision is we're going to take care of all of your personal finance needs and build all the financial products that are custom for healthcare professionals. These products, what they have in common is they connect into your paycheck. So the idea is that we take your pay and then we allocate it to the right place around paying off your debts, around your day-to-day spending, and then around saving and investing for the future. And so where we focus today is really around the debt side of things, because that's the most burning issue for these people. And we have products both around student loans and around personal debt.
Got it.
And kind of the center point for this is the experience where somebody comes to our platform, they provide just a few pieces of information, and from there we connect into all of the credit bureaus, the credit card companies, student loan servicers. We assemble their financial profile, and then we calculate the ways that we can save people money through our products. First is the student loans. So the average amount of student debt that anyone in healthcare has is about $80,000.
Right.
We help people get enrolled in government forgiveness programs. And the thing is, like, these programs are very inaccessible. So, for example, in public service loan forgiveness, only 2% of people, and the government publishes statistics about this, like, we're not making up.
Right.
Like 2% of people who apply for the program get successfully enrolled.
Why is it so low?
Well, they don't make it easy because, the government will be giving out billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And also, bureaucracy.
A lot of qualifiers, probably not the greatest portal that you have to use.
That. And then they also partner with servicers that are kind of independent. And the servicers are, they make money based on the amount of loans that they're servicing. To get enrolled, you have to, fill out these forms, which are essentially as complicated as doing your taxes.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you won't even hear back. Or it might be months later, and they'll ask for some clarification documents, and you might miss it. What our platform does is we partner with a student loan advisory group. And so we're the technology layer on top of it. We collect all the information that's needed. We had a big employer launch with SUNY Downstate, and we've saved people who worked with us an average of $64,000 over the lifetime of their loans.
Oh, wow.
So then the next side of things is personal loans. Based on the cash flow data that we collected, they're more fiscally responsible with their money. We built a custom underwriting model only for healthcare workers. We're actually able to consolidate their personal loans and credit card debt at interest rates that are up to 60% below the market.
Right.
We set up the payment from their paycheck. That both lowers the risk of them not paying. And second, it sets up the right automation and the right behavior. The third product, think of it as, what if you could redesign a credit card that's just for healthcare workers? And number two, a credit card that is designed to keep you out of debt rather than other cards which are designed to get you in debt.
Right.
We have a waiting list of 10,000 nurses for the card. They've been referring other people.
So how would it do that? Are there like insights embedded in your spending patterns and it makes recommendations, or how would that work?
So your paycheck would come to us. We would pay your card off in the optimal way to balance how much you should have in your checking account with how much you're spending, and then kind of guide you as you go. Like, we know how much you're making, and we can coach you on your spending patterns. And then if you end up spending more and you get paid less for whatever reason and you can't pay it off, then we would set up the remainder as installment payments over a few months to ensure that, you're not going to just get stuck in a debt cycle.
That makes sense. I'm seeing the connections here and how all these things come together to help somebody who's in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But this you're also a second time founder. This isn't your first time around the sun. You started with LeanPlum, which you founded and exited. Like, how does that experience as a first time founder? First, tell us about that, but then how does it like teach you about the second go?
So that was based on some work that I had done at Google around A/B testing, and it turned into a marketing automation platform. Grew it to about 30 million in ARR. Made a lot of mistakes on the way. I did that for 8 years.
Yeah.
And definitely learned a ton. And one thing, one of the lessons was around focus. Like, don't try to do too many things, or you're not going to do anything.
What was
particularly well.
one thing that you felt like you spent so much time the first time around and it was a complete waste of time to you?
I mean, at the beginning, we definitely built a lot of things that didn't end up getting used. Maybe a lot of things that we thought would, look sexy and like a demo or, it'd help us sell the product. It's important to understand who your customer is and what are their pain points. So actually, like, we started as an A/B testing product, and it was for product managers. And then we found out that, well, they did have a need for this, but it tended to be short-lived. So
why?
Well, the need for A/B testing is really they have a lot of questions about their product, features that they might launch, and once they answer those questions, they might not have more questions for a while.
Repeat use case,
Yeah. Then we saw like, oh, the marketing team has a much bigger budget, and what is something we can build that it's not really a nice to have. It's like your business is impacted if you stop using it.
Right.
And that's really around being able to engage with your users.
Yeah.
In the end. So that turned into like from a nice to have to a must have.
Tell me a little bit. What did LeanPlum do, or what does it do?
We enable marketers to communicate with their users at scale. Our customers had millions of users.
Yeah.
They could have millions, tens of millions of users, and you don't want to send generic messages, or it's kind of seen as spam. Like if you send everyone the same thing, everyone kind of has their own needs. They're in a different place in their relationship with you as a company. And so we basically took the data from users and made it available kind of in this real-time fashion where you can personalize the messages that go out. And these are in the form of push notifications, in-app messages. So it was mainly for mobile-first companies. That's kind of where we specialize.
Right.
And then also emails.
Because mobile first, the idea is that there's high engagement with those users in general, or is there another pattern that's associated with those?
We saw it as kind of like the next wave of company. Like
That makes sense.
Like the big legacy marketing automation players like Oracle, Salesforce, they were email first, but then we saw this trend with mobile apps getting huge adoption. This was back in 2012. Like people are still, mobile apps were, still kind of in their infancy. Like there weren't many tools out there specifically for that. So we saw that as like a good niche that we can play in.
Yeah. So it strikes me as interesting that you started with the marketing automation side with LeanPlum, and then you dive into the one of the most complex regulated industries. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, is it personal for you? Like, what's your attachment to the issue, and why you wanted to get started here?
Well, both my parents were in the healthcare field as well.
They're really nice.
Yeah, they're both retired now, but they were in healthcare, and the pandemic really put a spotlight on it as well. The access to quality care is like getting pretty limited here, and that's really going to affect this aging population in the country.
Yeah, the small town I'm from, there's no ZocDoc there. Like, healthcare access is very hard. Like, North Carolina, you went to school in North Carolina too. Mm-hmm. Like, you go to those like rural towns and there's like nothing. You have to go to either Raleigh, Charlotte, whatever. But yeah, it's like a deeply personal issue for many people. So it makes sense that you would, so you gain the experience the first time around, and now it's like, how do I apply this to something that has a huge impact on people? So my elementary understanding of the healthcare industry is that there's a lot broken with it. There are a lot of regulatory hurdles. It's very expensive from the administration side. What are the other aspects of healthcare that make this a particularly interesting problem to solve?
It's actually, to me, it's interesting both from the healthcare aspect and the financial aspect. So we're kind of at the center of two different things, like two different regulated industries. From a healthcare perspective, it's like the thing that keeps them up at night is around staffing shortages. And I think it's about like finding creative solutions that can be deployed quickly. So one thing is that hospitals, they're very risk averse. They move very slowly. Right. So how do we design something that can get in the hands of people and make impact quickly? The second aspect is all the financial things and how we can actually do the right thing for the user. Most financial companies actually have perverse incentives because they make money on things like interest or fees.
Right.
So how do we like align, what the hospital cares about, what the employee cares about, what is the right thing for the person, and also how we can be successful as a business. And so you have all these things that you have to align, and then it has to be, compliant. There's a lot of like scrutiny around these, banks that work with fintech companies. And so, and as a startup, the advantage you have is speed.
Yeah.
But that's at odds with, meeting compliance standards. So it just makes you have to be creative. And, as a technology guy and a product guy,
Yeah.
like being creative is, it's really exciting. That's what motivates me.
Yeah.
Right. So, to address like a little bit of it, we started as a direct-to-consumer product for healthcare workers. And so that kind of DNA got us to be able to, like when we go to a hospital, we don't have to integrate with them, right? Because we've already built out the connections to payroll systems and the user experiences that are self-service. By building products that they're valuable to the user and people would use it independently of it being an employee benefit, that means that the employer doesn't have to pay anything.
Right. Right.
They could pay something, and because we're aligned with retention, they would want to pay stuff. And that's partly why we're going through employers is that, because there's this alignment of solving financial stress and around improving retention, by them paying into this benefit, it would make it that much better for the user.
That makes sense. And the other part of the understanding is like when students are going to school, medical school to like study medicine, many of them may gravitate around like being an anesthesiologist or another profession that's certainly high paying. But even folks like that, what you're telling me is like, even if they land something like that, they're facing a mountain of debt unless they're on scholarship. So potentially that's incentivizing people not even to enter medicine in the first place, right?
Yeah, and I think only 0.2% of healthcare workers are anesthesiologists, and a lot of this is also limited, like kind of by the government, and the government limits. It's kind of arbitrary.
What do you mean by that?
Like how many resident slots are available at each place, and I talked to the SUNY downstate, execs there, and they kind of noted that like, look, we would love to be able to take more residents, but we're limited by what the government is approving.
Got it.
And so not everyone has the luxury of being able to get into those lucrative fields, unfortunately. And even if you do, you're faced with, you're starting your career probably in your 30s. Then you've got to pay like, malpractice insurance,
right,
and thousands on your student loans. And, it can be a long time before you actually feel wealthy. And unfortunately, the counterintuitive thing too is like when people start, they go from like not being paid well to being paid a lot.
Yeah.
They kind of make up for feeling
the
deprived.
Experiences they lost, right?
And they actually, I know, and they actually get into more debt.
Oh man.
Because then they just spend like crazy.
I've always wondered too, like what happens if you go through 10 years of schooling and then you find out 2 years in you don't like this anymore, right? And then you're still stuck with the medical debt.
That is rough.
Yeah.
That's probably why more people than not are not getting into it. Or I keep hearing stories more and more, people are pre-med and then they end up deciding not to go through with it after.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to come back to clinical burnout. Like, describe that to me, and maybe any stories that you've heard from folks that you've interviewed or you've worked with as a part of Plannery.
Yeah, so clinical burnout it's caused by just overexposure to kind of the same stressors that aren't going away, and it could be due to a number of things. It could be due to overwork. It could be due to things in your personal life, and one of those things is around your finances. And if you're just stressed about something over and over, it leads to this state of exhaustion. And then that you kind of carry that along, everywhere you go, including into the workplace. And then that can lead to, like some things like, bedside manners being compromised, but also things like medical errors and, worse patient outcomes. And then this workplace that, people are just stressed out and it's unpleasant, your coworkers are starting to be affected by it. And then it leads to, it can lead to turnover, you're leaving your job for something else. And there's all this turnover means there's more work on other employees to train people. And this kind of cycle of like everyone else getting stressed. Of course, it can lead to anxiety and depression as well. So it's actually a medical, condition as well. So it's pretty serious. A story that we kind of go back to a lot is for my co-founder. So his aunt is a nurse, and she, one day she came crying to my co-founder that she just had this feeling of being poor, like constantly. Even though maybe she wasn't necessarily poor, but she felt poor. And she couldn't pay for her son's wedding. And, she just didn't really know what to do. Like, she didn't know the basics. Unfortunately, people have to read books in this country on how to manage your money. And healthcare workers definitely do not learn about personal finance. And so my co-founder sat with her, and over a few months, like he taught her about, credit cards and how to use them correctly, and then around like saving and investing, how do you grow your money and what types of accounts you should use. And then she, she started just being, smiling and being happy and feeling like not poor anymore. And it was like a big transformation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's probably thousands of people that go through that. So it's got to be like really, like being a founder, as you know, is hard, right? So like getting up each day and like having that mission probably keeps you focused when there's certainly like bad days as founders, as you probably know.
Oh yeah, especially early on. Like it's like, until you've found like the level of scale, like you kind of ask yourself, like, why are you doing this all the time? Why are you like going through all this compliance with a bank and having to check off 100 items, and then, getting rejected by hospitals that you're trying to help because they're risk averse and they want to see other proof points. And you think like, well, I'm doing it for this mission, but like I'm not in the hands of enough people to feel like I'm actually doing it. So you really just have to focus on the future and like what it could be.
Can't be like short term. Long term.
That
makes sense. Why did you, so maybe, earlier you mentioned that you started off like direct to consumer. Why did you make the switch to working with organizations if you knew some of the hurdles of like maybe they're slower, they need to see more social proof in the first place? What was the insight or the discovery of that?
So the insight is really when we talk to hospitals, like hearing consistently their number one challenge is workforce. And it was just like too big of an opportunity to pass up, where like if we could crack this, like it's hard to get into a hospital, but once you're in, you're probably not going to get out, which is the nice thing. And that
like an ERP, it's like once you have that, there's no way you're ripping that out.
Like they move slow, so it can work to your advantage as well. And so we thought it was worth it to crack that nut, because that would really give us a hold into the market. It also should reduce the acquisition cost, because once you're in a hospital, then you can reach all their employees. The employees know that you've been vetted by the hospital, and then the hospital is subsidizing it as well. So you're making the benefits like even greater. And like for the card product, for example, like financially for it to work, credit card products tend to pay out their interchange in the form of rewards. And so how are you going to make money? Well, you make money on interest. But if we make money on interest, then we're essentially incentivizing people to get into debt.
Compounding the problem,
We don't want to do that, right? So we want to reduce the interest. And so then the only other thing is like a subscription fee that you would pay.
Right.
And then that's where, a hospital could pay that fee, and then it's free for the end consumer. So if we go with that model, then the adoption of the product would actually be much greater.
Yeah. There's also, I totally buy that. There's also the point of like, it's a really complex challenge. And when you solve complex challenges, you build trust for these institutions. So they won't want to necessarily like move to another partner or look to another solution. They'll trust you more, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So how are things going today? Like, what's the current state of Plannery? How are things going? What are the biggest things on your item list today?
So really excited. So we had the launch of SUNY Downstate a few months ago. That was our big, first big hospital launch. We got 20% of the employees to engage with us in a couple of weeks. And that was a model that was like paid by the employees. So in order to save them an estimated $64,000 on their student loans, they did have to pay a fee to enroll in that program. And, we don't want to have to do that long term. So actually, we met with the CEO and the head of HR. And they asked us, like, can we transition to a model where we pay and the employees don't? And that was pretty incredible, because actually the way that we were able to get in there was saying that we were free.
Right.
But now that they saw the value, now they have budget for it. So that's really exciting.
You talked about earlier, like your early days of building, you build a lot of stuff and you assume that things are going to work. But then on the opposite end, it's like you only built that because you talked to like customers in the first place. Is there like something to that for you, like in terms of how it informs your future product development?
Yeah, for sure. We talk to, it's both talking to healthcare workers as well as these hospital executives and hearing what they care about. And, one thing that we hear, which is pretty interesting, is that a lot of these healthcare systems have their own employee benefits too, that they already do. And I think there's an interesting opportunity in the future where we can essentially layer on, the benefits we can provide, the benefits the employer provides, and then somebody's financial picture. And then maybe there's even AI involved in this. Like, we can start to really automate what a financial advisor would do and show somebody their complete picture, how it works with their employer, how it works with everything else out there, and really provide personal recommendations on what to do. AI is still in its infancy, and it's been tried a little bit so far within financial advising, and to pretty limited success at this point. So I think we have a long way to go around building trust and making better recommendations. There's a lot of interesting work in that field, and as a technology guy, I'm really excited about that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think you founded your first company in San Francisco, and on the other hand, Plannery is based here in New York City. Is that right?
Well, we're actually split.
You're split.
Okay. Unfortunately, a little bit. So my co-founder is based in the Bay Area. Okay. I'm in New York, and then our team, we have 6 people. 3 are in New York, 1's in Boston, and 2 are in San Francisco. I would say, there's pros and cons. I think we would work a little bit better if we were all together in person. But we have this arrangement where we see each other 1 week a month.
Oh, nice.
Which is like a good way to mitigate. And then the other thing is that there are benefits to being in San Francisco and New York.
Yeah.
New York has its own, thriving tech scene, and, especially in fintech. I would say in fintech, it's probably better than San Francisco, actually.
I mean, we're here, like in Soho. Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And healthcare too, like industries where your customers are.
Yeah, healthcare, really big on the East Coast as well, and in New York City.
Yeah.
And, our first big hospital, it just happened to be in New York City. We weren't even trying to. It just happened to be that way because that's where the opportunity is.
That makes sense. Another interesting part of your resume is you were in a Forbes 30 under 30 class. Tell me about that experience, and did it open any doors for you? What have you seen as a result of being nominated to that list?
It was a very nice recognition. It was given in 2017 during my last company. I think where it's been helpful is it's been a really nice community to be part of, kind of like a support group.
Yeah.
And with a lot of other founders and, very ambitious people. And so, we've helped each other through situations by, talking through it. I made a bunch of friendships. I've gone in various business opportunities, partnership opportunities, etc. Nothing that's like life-changing, but it's a nice thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you're, so believe you're currently fundraising. You're a second-time founder. Like, what lessons are there for first-time founders? Like, what can you help other founders that are potentially navigating this process for the first time do differently or avoid altogether?
Oh God, yeah. I think one thing that's been helpful. So the reason why most startups fail is actually co-founder issues.
Yeah,
and a lot of people don't necessarily put enough diligence into finding a co-founder, making sure you're compatible. Even if it could work, you don't do the work to make it work. It's a relationship at the end of the day. And there's something we found really useful when I started Plannery with my co-founder. There's a First Round Capital has a co-founder questionnaire, and we spend the first, week probably working together, just like going through that questionnaire. There's I don't remember, like 50 or 100 questions.
We'll link it in the bio. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's almost like a therapy session. Like, you talk about like your values, what you care about, what are your strengths, weaknesses.
Is there anything like surprising on there that like, oh, I didn't think they would ask that question, or it led to like an interesting discussion with your co-founder?
Oh, I mean, everything was pretty. I think the most interesting. Like, I think like when you talk enough about values, it gets pretty philosophical.
Yeah,
it actually leads to good insights on the product. Like what I talked about with the card product. Like, how are we going to avoid the traditional incentives that like financial companies have to just screw customers over and make money on interest, get people in debt? Like, we talked a lot about like we don't want to build a company like that. So then how do we actually put into practice? And then it led to product insights.
Right, that makes sense. You're a technology guy. You've said that. You're also the CTO of the company. Maybe founders, especially non-technical founders, like give a guide for those folks to find the right CTO partner. What makes good ones versus great ones? I don't know if you have a perspective on it. Would love to hear it.
Well, a founder will look for a CTO too early a lot of the time. Like, they'll have an idea and they want someone to build it, but they're actually doing it in the wrong order. And especially in today's environment where you've got AI, you've got so many like no-code tools, like you can get a long way without having a CTO, without having to actually build something to test an idea. I would say like go sell your product first before you have a product.
Yeah. Is that like building a pitch deck and that sort of thing, or even like a landing page even?
Even more than a pitch deck. I mean, you could build stuff in Figma, you could build little like prototypes, or you can do stuff manually. Like I hear many ideas where you don't have to automate something. You can even help people with, AI behind this, with ChatGPT and like with like whatever skill set is involved in the domain. Like my co-founder helping us on with her finances, just sitting down with her and like seeing if it's useful, right?
Yeah.
There are many things that you can do. So to find a good CTO, you should really have your idea validated pretty well. Like, think of it as fundraising, right? Like, what is an investor going to look for? Like, you're going to have to do a bunch of work to raise a seed around these days.
Yeah.
And any good CTO is going to expect that kind of level of thinking and work being done. Otherwise, they might as well start their own, startup with their own idea.
Right. I think that's really interesting. Like, there's a piece in there about, make sure that you validate the idea, get some sales. Like, don't necessarily think that you need to jump on, which reminds me of your first answer, which is my first experience. We built too much too early. But then there's also a piece I'm curious about, like, you're making a hire for CTO. That's a long-term commitment. So it's not just about the first 6 months, 9 months. What about 5 years into the business? So what's the level of foresight, or what are the things you should look for in a potential CTO partner that will tell you they're going to be a good fit 4 or 5 years into the journey?
I was 23 when I started my last company. I survived there 8 years.
Yeah. I like how you use the word survived.
Yeah, because, actually, I don't know if there's probably some, stats on this, but CTO co-founders, I think they tend to not last 5 years on average.
Why is that?
At some point, because what happens is they'll be like really good at building, at writing code, and then the team will grow, and then they have to manage an engineering team, and then a lot of people are out of their depth. Or if the company is successful and they grow too fast, it's hard to grow at the pace of the company. There's probably different schools of thought on this. I would say generally when you hire, you don't need to, it might be overkill to find somebody who would be there 10 years from now, but you do have to get the company off the ground. So I would prioritize I would say 3 years.
Right.
Of course, it's very disruptive for a founder to leave, but the best you can hope for is they can do the job for 3 years, and then you hope that they can grow with the company.
Yeah.
And this applies to you as well as a founder. I mean, the chance that if your company takes off, I see so often CEOs get replaced too. Yeah. And it's just and you have to be a bit humble, and you have to be okay with it. In the end, if you care about the mission of what your company's doing, you do have to recognize when, it might be time that you're not the right person to lead it anymore.
Yeah.
And being able to, kind of put your ego aside.
Yeah. What about on the flip side, though? You're the CTO, and a founder comes to you and wants to sell you on their business. What are you looking to evaluate with a non-technical founder?
I'm seeing how they, how much work have they done to validate their business? Have they talked to a customer? Do they know who their customer is?
It seems obvious,
what
but
their pain point
it's
is?
hard, right? It's hard to talk to customers. I'm sure, who was the first customer you talked to as part of this process? It's hard.
It's hard to talk to healthcare workers about their personal debt.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know that was extremely hard to do. And I was always kind of questioning, does that mean they don't have the problem, or they're just hard to get a hold of, or they're pretty uncomfortable talking about it because there is a stigma around it, and people don't like talking about things that stress them out.
True.
Especially when you don't know them well.
Right. So tell me about your co-founder. How do you split responsibilities? It may be as obvious as you're the CTO, so you oversee engineering and everything like that, but is there other aspects that you had to talk about in the early days of responsibility management?
So my co-founder comes from consumer finance for the past 20 years, and he's worked in marketing roles and a little bit in product. And then my background is in, engineering, and also as a second-time founder. So I have that kind of experience to bring to the table. And so that means we're very collaborative on a lot of things. We do have our areas of responsibility. So that's, for my co-founder, it's going to be on go-to-market, and then on operations. And then for me, it's product, engineering, and design. But then the way that we tend to be very collaborative, because I have experience fundraising in the past. And I do have experience, being in a B2B SaaS company with, starting a sales motion from the ground up. So I have a lot of things to offer there and around customer development. And my co-founder has the domain expertise around these financial products. So he has a lot of, say on the product. And so, it's really a collaboration at the end of the day.
You are in New York. What are your thoughts on New York City tech? And this is going to be a bit of a leading question, but a little I'm just struck by this data point recently from Lightspeed, which it said that for the first time last year, New York accounted for 15% of all VC funding in the US, compared to Bay Area, which is 23%. That's 15% for the first time ever. for my lane, it seemed the founders we met at an event for NYC founders. Like, it feels like New York's having a moment. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been pretty impressed with the tech ecosystem here.
Yeah.
Seeing it grow, seeing like there's so many different events and like subgroups. There's fintech, there's health tech, there's multiple groups within each one. There's events for founders. So it's really, and it's kind of, it's small enough too, where like if you go to different events, you'll run into the same people. So it's kind of it's a nice community as well.
Yeah.
I think it shines. It depends on like what area of tech you're in. So for fintech, it's amazing. If you're doing AI stuff, though, I hear that San Francisco is really the place to be. The other thing that I'll kind of know that's a bit interesting is like on the engineering side, maybe it's because like the tech ecosystem is younger here, but you don't tend to meet as many engineers who have like decades of experience in like top tech companies.
Right.
So that is like one drawback. I guess it'll take time to get there.
Yeah.
But I noticed that when I went to a conference in San Francisco last year, and I was kind of reminded that like, oh, I'm meeting these like engineering directors with like 20, 30 years of experience. And like, I kind of forgot like that those people existed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you're in the fundraising process. Who's a dream investor or founder you'd love to meet that you haven't already?
I would say it'd be really cool to meet Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing, like his journey from going, starting with like, it was a very noble cause around selling books. And like, how did you go from that to building one of the most valuable tech companies, and then doing it in a way where everyone's questioning, like, are you just a charity like the whole time because you're losing money every year, and then going on to like going into space, and similarly, like I feel like every opportunity I take, I want to take like a little bit more risk each time.
Yeah.
I think my last company was like something I knew I could do. This is definitely a bit harder.
Yeah.
It's got this nice mission. Maybe the thing after, I don't know if it'll be space, but like I want to get more and more ambitious as I go. As long as I earn my success along the way.
That makes sense. I assume you read like all the annual letters he would write, basically to investors. Yeah. It's good reading for those that haven't. You're also in New York. What's your favorite place to eat here?
I love Japanese food.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with Nami Nori. It's near where I live, and the hand rolls are amazing there, and it's also reasonable priced. Really good place to show people who are in town as well for like a nice meal that's like low pressure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last question. So I went to UNC, you went to Duke. I don't know if people know that about you, but I won't hold that against you. Any predictions for the tournament?
I didn't fill a bracket out this year. I only fill out a bracket when I'm pretty sure Duke's gonna win.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it says. I think the performance in the ACC tournament kind of spooked me a bit.
Yeah.
I'm hoping though, and I will try to go to one of the games. The first two rounds are in Brooklyn.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this earlier, but the 2 years that I picked Duke to win, they won the championships. I have not picked them to win this year though. So I might get some hate from that from some of my friends, but, well, thanks for stopping by. We're rooting for you. It's awesome to see the stuff that you're doing at Plannery. So appreciate your time today, Andrew.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Justin. It's been great.